Let's take a few minutes and look at this AP exam question about analyzing bivariate data. Again, this is bivariate data because you are looking not just at one quantitative variable, you are looking at the connection or the relationship, the association between two quantitative variables. So notice this question never asked you to describe the scatter plot. If you describe a scatter plot, though, you should give the direction. You should describe any unusual features that you see. You should also describe the form and the strength. So if I were to describe this scatter plot, there's a positive association between the number of customers in line and the time to complete the checkout. I would say that this is a linear form, and I would say that this is a relatively strong relationship. Most of those points are relatively close to the best fit line and will have small residuals. However, there is one outlier, and this question is at the very end in the last part about describing that outlier. There wasn't anywhere in this question where you had to build the least squares regression line. If you had to do that, the constant is always the intercept. This is the x variable, and next to that, the coefficient next to that would be the slope. So part A was about identifying and interpreting the intercept. So the intercept is the 72.95. So remember, the intercept is the predicted y value that you get when the x value is 0. So in context, you need to describe what an x value of 0 means, and you need to explain that this is an estimated or a predicted y value. So in this context, the intercept of the LSRL, that stands for least squares regression line, you didn't have to include that, but I've learned to like that abbreviation. It suggests that for a customer with 0 customers in front of them, so that's the x variable of 0, the predicted, that word is important, time to complete the checkout, there's the y value, and then here is the intercept. It's about 72.95 seconds. So the coefficient of determination, that's also r squared, interpreting that this is a phrase that you would want to memorize. Don't use adjusted r squared. Make sure you're using the real value of r squared. So the coefficient of determination is 73.33%. So in context, this means that 73.33% of the variation, that word is required, in the y values, that's the time to complete the checkout. It is not in the predicted, it's in the actual y values. Is explained, or you could be, is determined by, is explained by the least squares regression line, or you could say the best fit line, the linear relationship, but then you should describe what x is, where x is the number of customers in front of the customer in line. So then last, one point in the data was determined to be an outlier. Circle that point and then explain why that point is an outlier. But you have to explain in context. Don't just circle the outlier and say, well, it's an outlier because it's away from all of the other points. That won't be good enough to get credit. You have to describe it in context by telling the story. So this is what I said. So the scatter plot indicates a positive association between the number of customers in line and the time to complete the checkout. So the circled point is thus an outlier because given the number of customers, 3, in line in front of this person, this customer in question. So given that we're working with an x value of 3, the actual amount of time to complete the checkout was very low. It's only about 100 seconds. So the actual time to complete the checkout would be about here. It's a little bit above the intercept, maybe about 100 seconds. That's quite low compared to what the linear trend in the scatter plot suggests, compared to the positive relationship that we see in that scatter plot. And you could make a very specific comparison because notice there is another point with an x value of 3 and it has a much higher y value. So that's very specific. In particular, it took a different customer with 3 in line in front of them nearly 6 times as much time to complete the checkout. around 600 seconds. So notice for this customer with 3 customers in line, I can read off the Y value. I just approximated it. Don't say it is 600 seconds. You could just say it's around 600 seconds. And I'm showing the degree of the comparison because this is 6 times as much time to complete the checkout compared to the customer represented by the circled point, by the outlier. So that's a comparison that you could use to describe in this context why that point is so unusual compared to the other points that we see in the scatter plot.